my heart are the issues of my heart. It's gratefulness. I asked Madge if she'd sing Home before we finish, just because so many have come home for holidays. Our theme is forgiveness for the month of November, which seemed to be a strange theme for the month of Thanksgiving, because that's the emphasis. The national holiday for November is Thanksgiving, but ours here at All Souls is forgiveness. But the longer I've been into this month, the more I realize that Thanksgiving is a wonderful or forgiveness is an excellent concept or emotion, and it really is an emotion and a kind of devotion when it comes to being thankful for anything, because it's hard to be thankful without forgiveness. Talk to me, somebody. Especially when families gather. Nobody can hurt you like somebody you love or who loves you. And so welcoming and graciousness and kindness is especially imposed upon you. My mom and our family were, I wasn't there, but they went out to Los Cabos for lunch. The other day I had something that I had to do, but they went out and they were all sitting there, my mom and 4 generations from her egg were sitting there eating, and I think 3 different people came over to the table to make reference to them about how they were drawn to them as a family. And it was beautiful that and they weren't doing anything but just eating. And they came over to her and complimented her on being the matriarch. Presumably she was the oldest one there. And they celebrated her for being the matriarch of all of her children and grandchildren and great-grand who were sitting at the table with her, and how beautiful. And there was a couple who were alone. They were not with their children. And the presumption was that they missed family. And sometimes family are not together because of unforgiveness or because of issues that we carry, sometimes for decades. Some family members haven't spoken since the last funeral of a loved one. Some have not spoken since somebody married somebody they didn't want them to marry, or divorced someone they didn't want them to divorce. Or people bring up things that are decades old, issues that you had as children that were never dealt with, never even discussed, never brought up. Some family members are finding out things about family members they didn't know existed in them all these years, and now they're in their 50s and 60s and some in their 70s and 80s and are still wrestling with issues over which they've never had victory and with which they've never dealt. And now that unforgiveness is possibly causing physical maladies, heart conditions and stress and joints and pain, chronic pain, chronic agonies. And so rethinking why forgiveness is necessary, and we usually think of spiritual things or maybe being forgiven by God. I talked the last time when we first brought up the subject of forgiveness that many people, me one of them, had to get to the place where I could acknowledge that I needed to forgive God, my image of God at that time, and it was a love-hate relationship. That God I was always concerned that God could not or would not forgive me for whatever reason. And if that God did forgive me, would that God continue to forgive me? And why did I always have to feel repentant toward an angry God? Our lady from Wales made reference to that. There are thousands who watch, but she's actually of the 29 that actually became virtual members of All Souls. One of the ladies they told us recently was from way out west. There's a lot of people wrestling with religious ideologies and concepts about forgiveness, and they struggle always feeling that God holds a grudge against them, and therefore if you really believe in that God of grudge holding, then you carry that and it issues forth in your other relationships, especially if you're into that type God. That's the biblical God that most people believe holds several thousand-year grudges, and one day will torture you, kill you, and then torture you in a customized torture chamber, supervised by the devil himself or herself, or get them mixed up. So these issues we're wrestling with. I come from a classical Pentecostal background, 4 generations of people who feared God and wondered if God would ever fully like them. We were afraid to doubt that God loved us, because that would be a sin. God loves you unconditionally, and if you don't believe that, he's going to send you to hell. How many decades and centuries and millennia have we bought into that? God loves you unconditionally. If you were the only person on earth, Jesus would have died for you. Do you believe that? No. Well, to hell with you. You're going straight to hell if you... That is an attitude we've had, and I preached it, and I don't know, I accepted it, whether I believed it or not. I accepted it. It was part of the culture, part of the character, part of the language, part of the concept, and I carried it for the first 50 years of my life. And then I began to think, is that really what I believe? And if I do, can I actually commit to that kind of psychotic posture? And Jesus says in the scriptures, is quoted to have said, forgive your brother or your friend or your neighbor 7 times, 70 times a day. That's 490 times, I think. Who gets offended that many times a day? One honest gentleman raised his hand. And if you get offended that many times a day, do you get that many apologies? Because the scripture says, according to Jesus, you should forgive somebody that many times, or somebody's that many. You don't like your supervisor, you don't like your boss, you don't like your spouse, your children, your mom and your daddy and your siblings and your neighbor and the police officer and the person that got ahead of you. There's so many issues in a single day. He basically is saying that forgiveness is infinite. It's like breathing. It's like the process of eliminating waste out of your system. Are you regular? Do you need some kind of softener? Talk to me. Do you need more what's in your diet? Fiber. We need to talk about the faith of fibers and the fibers of faith that keep you regular and all. So you don't fill your bodies with toxicities or poisons that can kill you. Forgiveness, to sort of abbreviate this, forgiveness is giving up the right to be right. Not the reason, because all of us think we have reasons to be right. But giving up the right to be right, or giving up the right to be angry. All of us have reasons. It's not giving up the reason to be angry, but the right to be angry. Giving up the right to be hurt, not always the reason to be hurt. Can I give up my right to be hurt? My right to be angry? My right to be right? Because everybody thinks they're right. And of course on the planet, there are only a few of us who are. I have my book out there, 7 Steps to Humility and How I Achieved It. You can get it on your way out. Sunday school, I was given a badge for humility, but they took it away from me because I wore it so much. We all deal with anger issues. I have 2 gentlemen here from South Africa. I'm going to have you just say a word, if you will. Cindy is from Johannesburg, and behind him is Kosa Jackson. They are men who grew up in the same religious background as I did, Pentecostalism in various forms. Bishop Jackson will now be the presiding bishop of the Metacostal movement in South Africa. He's a metaphysician and a Pentecostal, born that way, has recently come into the metaphysical approach of what we call expanded consciousness. So I'm going to have them both. But they came, and I went to South Africa the first time when there was apartheid, 1978. Made several trips over there. And then I know what it is since apartheid. These men, if we had time to hear their stories, came up with some really difficult issues. And that apartheid was founded by and functioned and ran by a Dutch Reformed Church or Christians. We visited, when I was with Gina and I went over to be with Musi in August, and we visited Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for 18 years, though 27 years altogether, but 18 years. We saw the actual cell where he laid on a cold, hard floor. I actually brought dust back from a place in the guard area where they would go out and mix and mingle among each other, where he would hide the book The Long Way Home while he was writing it. And it was published while he was still in prison. And we learned that they didn't have windows like they do now. It was cold and rainy when we were there, and how the cold wind would blow in them, and the men would get diseases, and they would get to shower once or twice a week. And it was just the horrors that we don't know all the details of. And the guy that was our host was a former prisoner. Our tour guide was a former prisoner. Sometimes the former prisoner and the former guards are now. That's the only ones they hire as guards of the prison. But I wondered how, and I was riding with Musa in his car, one of my first trips over there with him as a guest, and there were white people begging from him. And I remember the anger I had the first time I went there. I preached at a Pentecostal church, and the pastor who they said, well, if you come to South Africa, I was the first black in their history to ever lead an integrated gospel team over there. That was back in '78. It took me 5 years to get in the country. And they wouldn't let me stay in a hotel unless I would stay on a whole floor by myself and pay for the whole floor. And you know that wasn't going to happen. And when we preached that Sunday, the very first service, we were coming out of the service, and a gentleman, the man who was the pastor, introduced me as those black people can really sing. He didn't say anything about me preaching. Those black people can sing. Well, it was two blacks, and two whites that sang, but they called us just blackies. Anyway, I sang and I preached, and we had a great service, and we were leaving the church, the restaurant where we ate, and a black man, they told me that I would be elevated to colored if I came. I couldn't be black. I said, my mom and daddy never black. They weren't going to let me be black. I get to be colored, and that's just a little under white. So I was going through this in '78. You're talking about forgiveness. I've relinquished a lot, but I went through that, and it was good that I did. On our way out of the restaurant, there was a black man who had been badly burned, and his skin was disfigured and twisted, and he came asking for money with his hands out. I hadn't had any of my American money changed. All I had was American money, so I couldn't resist. I looked at the gentleman who was the pastor, the Christian, tongue-talking Pentecostal pastor, to give the guy something, at least out of respect for me, but he didn't. So I rushed my hands in my pocket and took all the change I had and poured it in his hand. And this same gentleman who was the pastor he had an ill-skinned briefcase, and he hit that beggar. That black man with a twisted skin hit him so hard with his briefcase that the man fell on the ground. And it shocked all of us. And the money that I'd given him, hit the street right in front of the Carlton Hotel. My name was on the hotel. It wasn't the Carlton, it was the Ritz-Carlton. It was just a Carlton Hotel. I dropped to my knees and gathered the man in my arms and pushed that money back in his hands. And I said to the pastor, how dare you call yourself a Christian and hit that beggar with your ill-skinned briefcase and knock him to the ground in front of me? If you don't give him, he said, your money's not good for him. Your money doesn't, he can't spend your money. I said, he can spend yours. And if you don't give him some right now, in front of me and my guests, I'm going to call you a racist and tell everybody the whole time I preach in this country, and I'm going to be here for a week, that you're a racist. Give him money right now, or I'm not getting in your Mercedes. That's how angry that I never knew I could be that angry. Or I would kill you. No, I wasn't going to kill him. But I was so offended. He rushed his hands in his pocket, and he gave the man something and rushed away. And we talked about it the whole way back to where I was staying, which wasn't a hotel. Now I go there. Now, the last time I stayed in the Santon, whatever the name of the hotel is, one of the 5-star hotels, hosted by Musi, who was driving along in his car, and which happened to be a Jag at the time. And I saw several white guys come to him and to the car and ask him for money. He didn't think as much of it as I did, because my first experience there left me with grief and anger, and I had to go through my own process of forgiveness, because I was holding a grudge. I was holding anger. All of us in here have anger about something, a grudge about something. Pain, mostly out of our past. Most of our pain is historical. It's not why am I hurting, but where did the pain originate? What stories did you hear as a child? What are you wrestling with in your own soul and your own self about forgiveness? Especially somebody you love. My mother's grandfather is half white. And so we were always, even when we came to Oklahoma, they didn't consider us black enough. Black folk didn't. My dad tried to get a job as a janitor, and they told him he wasn't black enough. And it shocked him. He'd never heard that before. And we wrestled with being not black enough to be black and not light enough to be white. We were in between. And I didn't realize that stuff was accumulating in my very soul, and I was starting to hold grudges about who I am, who I'm not, who likes me, who doesn't, who accepts me, who receives me. Why? Why was I so offended? Why was I quick to react or respond? I used to be upset with South Africans because I thought there were more blacks there than whites, and why are y'all letting the white folks take over? The Lord has still delivered me today from years and years of wrestling with all this kind of, you don't realize you're carrying, I'm 65 years old, I was carrying baggage. Now, I'm not saying who's right or wrong, but everybody has a feeling about their rightness or their wrongness. When you give up your right to be right, that's the biggest step toward forgiveness that's possible. When you, not the reason, again, when you give up the right to be angry, we all have reasons to be angry. Forgiveness is giving up that right to be angry for which you have reason to be. Yes. That's a major miraculous awakening. That's a breakthrough that most people never experience. Forgive, Peter said, how many times shall we, well, in the book of Amos, it says that God forgave the Israelites or the Jews 3 times. So Peter was going to get some bonus points by saying to Jesus, how many times should I forgive my neighbor? 7 times? And Jesus said, no, 70 times 7. The inference was, of course, forever. How many people do you need to forgive? How many reasons? How easily are you offended in a single day? What offends you? How often are you offended? And why are you offended? Does the same offense bother you every Thanksgiving? Every Christmas? Every family reunion, every family disunion? Are you going to be offended tomorrow when you go back to work with the same thing you were offended last Monday or last Sunday? How many issues are we carrying infinitely that are eroding our character, our consciousness, almost making us mentally ill? Will you help me, guys? Just say something about the change in your mind and in your thinking. Whoever wants to come first. Costa Jackson, come. Stand right at that mic and just tell us how you manage that as a black South African born in what would be called the bush, lived in darkness as a child. Come right to that mic. And if you haven't forgiven anybody, well, we'll understand and we'll rebuke you to hell too, like the rest of the But just say it. He's a bishop now, and he's going to be our presiding bishop of the Metacostal movement.
Bishop, I want to say thank you very much for allowing us to come and be here. We always see you on YouTube and this congregation, but it's a great privilege for us to be here. I speak well when I'm interviewed.
You speak better when you're interviewed?
Yeah.
Good. Well, I just ask you, tell us about forgiveness.
You know, words means different things to different people. I come from an African traditional family and culture. We do not have the concept of a punitive God in our own religious background.
The African
traditional spirituality. So when you grew up from that background, we know what we call restorative justice.
Restorative justice.
In other words, when you have done something wrong in the community, when you accept that you have done something wrong, there are certain rituals that you do in order to be forgiven. It's only when you come to Christianity, where you are introduced to the God of the Bible, that is judgmental and punitive. We do not even have, in the concept of who God is, in African spirituality, we don't have male-female identities. Let me give you an example. Unkulunkulu, Shikwembu. These are not words that you can say it's male or female. So some of the things that you struggle with in the West, we do only because of being colonized.
Wow.
So the issue of forgiveness for me in the South African context is the concept of Ubuntu, which was properly communicated by the Archbishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela. I always make jokes that the two used to confuse people. The Archbishop once said, he came to the United States once, and then somebody said, "Hey, President Tutu, how is Archbishop Mandela doing?" So, because both of them, whereas the Archbishop could write, communicate, Mandela lived it out.
Lived it, yeah.
Yeah, he lived it out. There is a book which we can recommend. It's called The Spiritual Mandela, and which I think I gave it to Gina. So we have got a foundation in our nation that is based on forgiveness and reconciliation. And then you need to understand that during the time when they did what they call, there was a system in our country where 3 priests, Dutch Reformed, Anglican, and
Catholic?
Yes, they stood in the country where everybody came who have done something in the past against black people to, it was called
the Truth
and Reconciliation Commission.
Yeah.
But you see, from a biblical perspective, it's a little bit different, because our belief, as Christians, is that you are forgiven first. So if you are forgiven first, you have to forgive. I understand what you said about that punitive God, but at least the issue of forgiveness in my faith is not like TRC. TRC, it's you have to confess that you did something against me in the past, then I forgive you. But
what about your issues with white people?
Oh, my issue with white people were on 2 different levels. It was on the political level and my faith. What people must understand, most of us, Muzi included, it is our faith, irrespective of how we define it, it was our faith that made us to act out against injustice. It was not just because we were angry or bitter. It is the issue of your faith that makes you to say, you know what, I'm human and I have to be involved. Most of the leaders in South Africa, whether they believed in God or not, there was something in them that told them that, it's the right thing to bring racism to an end. On a personal level, when you say, how did I deal with it? It so happened that your friend, Bishop Joseph Garlington, when he adopted me as a young priest, he knew I was very angry. So he said to me one day, "You remind me of me when I was growing up." He was talking about himself when he grew up in this country. So he quoted Buddha, but then I did not know that he was quoting Buddha.
John Garlington quoted Buddha?
Yes, Joseph. He said, if you are angry the way I see you and holding grudges against everybody, it's like drinking poison and expecting them to die. So I didn't want to die and drink poison. But for me, I think being angry, being bitter, became something that wanted to take my life. Because I started developing sicknesses. I went to hospital. For 3 times they put this thing called gastroscopic, but they didn't find anything. And it was something supernatural, if there is such a thing. I don't think it was my own power. I understand now when we interact with you about expanded consciousnesses and levels of consciousnesses. I think something came over me. And it was like I had to start reaching out to the people that I felt they have hurt me. And as I started that journey, I discovered that it's not them, it's me. They also have their issues. That is why they oppressed us. It takes time for you to transcend some of these things. A lot of things happened to me which made me to, I think something came over me. I don't know if it's my own power, but something came over me that gave me the ability to forgive. And when I started releasing that forgiveness, I was rejected by my own.
Blacks.
Because if you were a black person then, and you start talking forgiveness, and you start talking reconciliation, then people looked at you as a sellout. They looked at you as somebody who's compromising the struggle, and so on and so forth. So that, everybody who takes this journey has to suffer. But one thing that I discovered was, as we continued moving all over the country, doing reconciliation meetings, asking white people, the same thing that happened in this country anyway, people were getting healed. White people were getting healed. I remember one day I was speaking to 300 African only.
African what?
Africans.
Afrikaans.
White
Yeah.
only.
Yeah.
I was just speaking and sharing my experiences and my testimony. And there was a couple, a family coming forward from the back. And this gentleman said, "You know what? I just want to tell this whole congregation because of your forgiveness." He said, "I have killed a black man, buried him in my farm. It is the first day that even my wife and children hear about it."
Wow.
But he said, when I was sitting at the back then looking at you, talking about how angry you were for us to have oppressed you, exploited you, he said, it was like you were putting a key and opening a door, and me and my family had to come out.
Wow.
You must remember at Moses' present Divine Feminine Conference, I was not part of the program because I'm helping Muzi, bring pastors and so on and so forth. But he asked me at the last time that, I think you should do the gender reconciliation. So it is not only racial reconciliation, it's gender reconciliation.
Yeah.
It's reconciliation in all areas of our lives. It's not an easy thing. Those of us who are in the middle, you go through much pain. Yeah, there are testimonies even up to today. We are busy helping. One testimony that I can share with you is that it was just a 15 minutes time that we did. You were there, you remember?
He conducted a Divine Feminist Conference in August in Johannesburg, where there were several thousand people in the convention center downtown. And he's...
It was 4,000 in Sandton and 2,000 in Soweto.
Wow.
So during that time when we asked, because there were more women than men, we just asked men, one man inside and then surrounded by women. Just a short thing like, let the women be honest and tell that man what is it that has affected them. So many people, they were doing that for the very first time. And there was this particular lady, amongst many, many, many testimonies that we are dealing with right now. She came to me, she said, when you were doing that, I knew that I have to take a journey to Soweto. She lives in the suburbs. She hasn't, there is this thing of secrecy. She knew who her dad was, but the family did not want her to be reconciled to her dad.
The secrecy is among the family.
Excuse me?
The secrecy is within the family. They don't tell.
She knows who the father is. She knows he wants to be reconciled to her. She knows she wants to, but the family doesn't want it. So she asked me what I should do. I said, you know what? You are matured. I will help you in the process. So as we are speaking right now, that lady, because of the Divine Feminine Conference, she's reconciled with her dad. And the whole family now is opening up to it. So there is something about the power of forgiveness.
Excuse me, she confronted the issue in her publicly that she was hurt or angry because she didn't know who her dad was?
Okay, this is what happened. The family did not want her to be reconciled with her dad all these years, but she wanted to.
Yeah.
So because of the conference, because of what happened there at the conference, she felt that she has to be reconciled to her dad no matter what.
I see. Yeah.
So I gave her some wisdom, because you have to exercise wisdom sometime, not to to do it properly, she called her mom, she called members of the family that this is what she was going to do. And she did it, and now they are reconciled. And the dad is so happy, and she is also very, very happy. Surprisingly, a lot of things were not going well for her. But immediately after that, things started breaking through, and her business began to rise up.
Wow.
So that is what we see. It's not easy to explain, but that is what we see. When we start reaching out, things happen. I have to confess that it is this thing of transcending. It is this thing of not wanting to be right. Because Bishop Garlington asked me a question, do you want to be reconciled or do you want to be right?
Right.
So
do you want to be right or do you want to be reconciled?
Because I was the righteous one. I was for justice. These white people must be punished, you see. So when he said, look, do you want to be right? Do you want to continue to be right, or do you want to be reconciled? I'm so glad I chose to be reconciled.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And I am here to testify to you that that pain that wanted to take my life left. I don't have that. Since I took the journey of going to white churches to speak about reconciliation. In some churches, I still remember I went to a church in 1996. That I'm 62 next year. That was the first time a black person could speak in that particular church that was built in 1956. And I saw the same thing. Everywhere you go, simple message, talk your story, people just open up.
Wow. We have, we're going to stop here in a couple of minutes. Let's give him a great big hand. Lucy, do you want to say something? Okay. Thank you, Bishop. He's writing books. His story is amazing. He's doing a lot of reconciliation work in South Africa. They both are. This last one was, and we need that same feminine conference in America. Gina spoke. Last year, 2 years ago, we went, and there were about 3,500 or 4,000 people came. It was a little bit of a resort outside. Gina spoke to about 3,500 women, and we did it again this year. And Michael Beckwith came, and Lisa Nichols of The Secret, and they're doing it again next August. There's already 100 people going on a tour from the Los Angeles area. But in America right now, with this whole idea, and let me make this comment, and then imagine I want you to close with the song Home. I think that this is going to sound political. I don't want it to. Women have been abused in this country and in the world for millennia. They've been treated like chattel and property. It seems unfair that the woman bears the brunt of the pregnancy and childbearing and the cycles and the cramps and the agony and the nurturing of the child at the breast, sometimes to the point that blood is drawn as the child eats. Men can impregnate a woman and not know he's done that and impregnate 10 others, and the woman is tied for the first 9 months and then 18 years raising the child, if not infinitely. There's an anger out there, and we didn't see it as passionately as we're seeing it now, with powerful men, ego and testosterone driven, abusing women on all levels of American society and the world. Rejection of the Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton was not just rejection of Hillary or the Democratic candidate. It was really a rejection of the female being in the most powerful office in this country and leader of the free world, replaced by a basically chauvinistic, angry, almost arrogant, testosterone, ego-driven man with brute force. Now women are coming out of the, I had to check my list to see, had I done something wrong in the thing? Because I think the church is next. They're doing the politicians and the entertainers and the businessmen. They haven't touched the church yet. There's been a lot of it in the church. The evangelical church, strongest support. That's Trump's base. And but when you see a God and when you worship a God who's angry and chauvinistic and mistreats or creates the female somewhat of a lesser level, it's easier to be devoted to that kind of brute force, that God is mean or mad. And the scripture actually says to the woman, because of what you did, Eve, you're going to have pain in childbearing, and your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. That's the three things the scripture says happens to the female, or Eve, because of her leading her husband Adam into sin. Now that's the Hebrew Christian Bible. That concept is deeply rooted into the culture, and Trump's base feeds that concept, feeds into that concept. So the mean kicking Haitians out of the country, the DACA debacle, all of those kinds of things are fed by his base. When he wants to feed his base, he comes up with something angry, and I could quote you several quotes from Hitler claiming his Christianity, Jesus being his Lord, and he was doing these things as a service to the kingdom. Most people don't know that. I'm not attacking Christianity itself. I'm saying religion who believes in an angry, visceral God who demands forgiveness, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay, and then we got to forgive. He's going to repay, but I got to forgive you. You didn't slap him, you slapped me, you know. So, but I got to forgive that God who says, vengeance is mine, I'm a jealous God, thou shalt have no other gods before. That whole concept, and there are millions of people awakening to a new way of thinking about that particular concept. Shake the energy around like this, just kind of shift it around. Hating men, hating women, hell has no fury like a woman scorned. That's from a play that was written back in the 1600s. But White House, Washington is experiencing that, and the White House itself will experience it. That this is not over until it's over. Are y'all hearing me? So we need to brace ourselves as people who are open, who are passionate, who are all souls and embracing everything and everybody. We must know the difference between what we consider ethical and moral and decent and of integrity, and what needs to be dealt with and confronted with. That's part of the social justice effort of this ministry. Sing a little bit of Home, Sweetheart, and then we'll all go home, because y'all gonna have to forgive me for going over a little bit. But I wanted Matt to sing this. Thank you. Home to forgiveness.
When I think of home, I think of a place where there's love overflowing. I wish I was home. I wish I was back there. With the things I've been knowing, wind that makes the tall grass bend into leaning. Suddenly the raindrops that fall have a meaning, sprinkling the sea. Makes it all so clean. Maybe there's a chance for us to go back now that we have some direction. It would sure be nice to be back home where there's love and affection, and just maybe I can convince time to slow up, giving me enough time in my life to grow up. Time, be my friend, help us start again. Suddenly my world's gone and changed its face, but I still know where I'm going. I I've had my mind spun around in space, and yet I've watched it growing. Oh, if you're listening, God, please don't make it hard to believe in the things that we see. Tell us, should we try and stay? Should we run away, or would it be better just to let things be? Living here in this brand new world, it might be a fantasy, oh, but it's taught us to love. So it's real, it's real, it's real to me. And I've learned that we must look inside our hearts to find a world full of love, like yours, like mine,
Hey, we're so happy you're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
LOVEBB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256, or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed
and be a blessing.